In the world of Rick and Morty, there are endless possibilities. Endless universes in which to adventure, endless hilariously named aliens to meet, and endless versions of our titular heroes, each with a backstory as unique as the next. Today, we're taking a look at 25 of the Mortiest Mortys that have ever crossed our screens. In no particular order because, geez, we all love our Mortys equally. One more thing, don't you Rick fans worry. Once we're done checking out all these Mortys, head on over to our friends at CBR to see the Rickiest Ricks. We've got you all covered. Now let's dive in. We would be remiss if we didn't start this list off with our very own Morty, good old Morty C-137. As Rick, also C-137, declares in the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, Morty 317 is the Mortiest Morty. While he may have just been trying to make his grandson feel better after learning that he could be replaced by any infinite number of Mortys out there in the multiverse, there is something special about Morty C-137. So we're gonna go ahead and choose to believe Rick. Sure, this Morty might not have the coolest hairdo or defining scar, but Morty C-137 can really hold his own and has the kind of empathy that really makes him a hero. In the episode Tales from the Citadel, or the Ricklantis Mix-Up, we got to meet a whole bunch of different Ricks and Mortys from all over the multiverse. One of our personal favorites is the Morty known as Western Morty, or in some circles, Cowboy Morty. You can tell he's different from other non-cowboy versions of Morty because of his very cool cowboy outfit, including a red bandana and cowprint chaps. When we find him later dancing on stage at the Creepy Morty, hey, a Morty's gotta do what a Morty's gotta do. He winds up in the middle of a deadly gunfight. But don't worry about Cowboy Morty. That little cowpoke isn't gonna say nothing to nobody. Our next Morty is none other than Hammerhead Morty, seen in the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, and again when he meets a horrifying demise in the Rickshank Redemption. And before you start thinking shark, nope, this Morty has an actual hammer for a head on top of his totally normal Morty body. But we don't want to label him as just a hammer because, as he says when we first meet him, he is so much more than that. Rick would beg to differ, however, as seen during that fateful night in the Rickshank Redemption as he wields the poor Hammerhead Morty as a weapon to take out a bunch of Ricks before finally allowing him to be annihilated by a plasma gun. Hammerhead Morty, gone but never forgotten. Just when we thought the only people to escape that terrible Cronenberging that took place in the episode Rick Potion number 9 were Rick and Morty, we get introduced to none other than Cronenberg Rick and Cronenberg Morty. Appearing out of a portal from a world where everyone is naturally a Cronenberg, it turns out that these versions of Rick and Morty accidentally turned everyone in their world into regular old humans and have made their way to Earth C-137 in order to take the place of the Rick and Morty who just left. Luckily for them, they now have this new, freshly Cronenberged world to blend right into, picking up where Rick and Morty C-137 left off. While you might think that Cronenberg Morty is the most terrifying and hideous of all the Mortys in the multiverse, you'd be wrong. There is one Morty that exists who is so disturbing, so horrifying to look upon that it makes you wonder what exactly is wrong with Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland that they could have created such a monster. And that Morty is none other than Long-Sleeved Morty. That's right. This Morty, who we also meet in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, actually has a long-sleeved shirt on. Cover your eyes, and for God's sake, think of the children! In the Rickshank Redemption, a number of Mortys lost their lives when transported into the Galactic Federation, and we can only hope for all of our sakes that this was sent back to the burning demon hole from whence he came. Good riddance to you, Morty, and your long sleeves. Moving on to another Morty who is less likely to haunt your dreams, we have Aqua Morty. We don't know much about Aqua Morty other than the fact that he appears to be a fish. Walking around with a fishbowl helmet securely on his head so he can breathe, Aqua Morty presumably lives at the Citadel with his counterpart Aqua Rick. He's in the audience at the trial of Rick C-137 at the Citadel of Ricks, and he's seen again as Rick and Morty C-137 make their escape later in the episode. In fact, in a lot of scenes that take place in the Citadel, Aqua Morty seems to be hanging around in the back, keeping an eye on the situation. The Citadel is a rough place for Ricks and Mortys alike. Some in particular have seen their fair share of troubles. Possibly none more than Cop Morty, a corrupt, jaded Morty who has been working the beat in Mortytown for way too long. When assigned a new Rick partner, Cop Morty makes it very clear that having compassion for Mortys is what got his last partner into trouble. He's clearly been hardened by years of Morty-on-Morty violence and now feels absolutely powerless to change any of the corruption going on in his city. One thing's for sure, Cop Morty hates being called a sidekick and no longer cares about doing things the right way.
Aw, geez, Rick, what do I know about knowing stuff? Get in the car.
Perhaps once he was an honest Morty, but after everything that he's seen, there's no going back. Not all Mortys from the Citadel are as jaded as Cop Morty, however, and some are still willing to risk it all for the good of all Mortys. Campaign Manager Morty is one of those Mortys. Sure, at first he doesn't believe that a Morty could be elected president and is fired for it, but when he learns that the newly elected President Morty is not who he pretends to be, Campaign Manager Morty goes to extreme lengths to reveal his true identity. He even goes so far as attempting to assassinate President Morty before he can do any damage, but is intercepted by security and is ejected into space. It's only as we see him floating through zero gravity that we realize who he was trying to stop all along. Back on Earth C-137, there are a few different Mortys who have popped up in episodes here and there since the show began. One of our favorites is the well-mannered Mechanical Morty, who was built alongside Mechanical Rick and Mechanical Summer by Rick in order to distract Beth while the real family were stuck in a post-apocalyptic wasteland in the episode Rickmancing the Stone. Unlike the other robots, Mechanical Morty actually starts to gain sentience by the end of the episode, trying to fight against his programming in order to continue to live.
I want to taste ice cream, but not just put it in my mouth and let it slide down my throat, but really eat it.
What the fuck?
But of course, Rick overrides him, and Mechanical Morty is no more. The happy little Mechanical Morty might have only been 3 weeks old, but he will be missed. Another Morty who is just a whole lot of fun is the one and only Lawyer Morty. While Morty and Summer are being interrogated by the council about the whereabouts of Rick C-137, Morty remarks that it's hardly fair that their lawyer is a Morty, and we see him standing just behind them in an ill-fitting suit, smiling away. Sure, he's not actually a lawyer, and if we were on trial, Lawyer Morty is not exactly who we'd want in our corner, but look at him! No wonder the Council of Ricks keeps him around for fun. On top of his happy face and cool dance moves, Lawyer Morty apparently has a pretty sweet pog collection too.
What? No, I don't want to see your pog collection.
There's a gang of Mortys who hang out together in the Citadel, and no, we're not talking about the Mortytown locos. We're talking about a bunch of young Mortys who all go to school together and one day decide to adventure out to the mysterious wishing portal. One of these Mortys is Glasses Morty, a seemingly average Morty aside from his compromised vision and possibly a little too much interest in his sister. There are a couple of clues that Glasses Morty might have these creepy interests, but we're just gonna blow right past that little detail. While most of us know him as Glasses Morty, his friends choose instead to refer to him as Specs. Another one of this gaggle of Mortys is Handed Morty, at least as he thinks he is known to the group. Unfortunately, as the guys are all sitting around a campfire talking about what they each want to ask for the wishing portal, it is revealed that his friends actually call him Fat Morty, which is really not a nice thing to call your friend, especially since Left-Handed Morty seems like a pretty nice, normal Morty who just hopes that the wishing portal leads to a land of French toast. Well, sure, he hopes it's somewhat genetically enhanced French toast, but who doesn't like the idea of a French toast world? Sounds delicious. Another Morty from this group of misfits is Lizard Morty, who you might be surprised to learn was not actually born a lizard. Nope, he was born a regular old Morty until on one fateful adventure with his Rick, he somehow became fused with a lizard, after which his Rick passed away, leaving him to enroll in Morty Academy in the Citadel. Personally, he hopes that the wishing portal leads to a place where there are a bunch of flies buzzing around. While he seems like a pretty nice Morty, he does take an opportunity to seriously burn Left-Handed Morty when he suggests that he should use his left hand to eat more vegetables if he didn't want to keep his other, more unfortunate nickname. And finally, we come to the last member of this Morty gang, Slick Morty. Every group needs one, just to balance the scales. Slick Morty has it all: a cool curly hairdo, dog tags, rolled up sleeves, and an experimental drama implant, which means that he reacts extremely dramatically to almost every situation. Slick Morty is as troubled as he is slick, having had 5 previous Ricks, each whose life was ended under mysterious circumstances, leaving Slick Morty stuck in the Morty Academy waiting to be assigned a new Rick. While he suggested the whole wishing portal adventure in the first place, he admits to not believing that it will actually do any good, and in a final act of drama, he jumps in, leaving his friends and the Citadel behind. With infinite possibilities, it only makes sense that some universes out there are going to be a little bit, backwards. This is exactly how we got the Morty we know as Genius Morty, best known from the comic book series issue number 3. Hailing from a dimension in which the Mortys are smart and the Ricks are dumb, Genius Morty shares all of the qualities of your average Rick: extreme intelligence and a total disregard for the feelings of those around him. So much so that his Rick just can't take it anymore and winds up attacking Genius Morty with a hammer after being disrespected by him one too many times. Well, we couldn't just talk about that friendly Morty gang without talking a bit more about the actual Morty gang from the Citadel, the Mortytown Locos. The Mortytown Locos we see in the episode are 3 different Mortys, all with some pretty extreme face tattoos. but no one can really be sure how many of them are out there. What we do know for certain is that these 3 didn't make it out of Tales from the Citadel alive after being eviscerated by Cop Morty in their drug den. The Mortytown logos are all in the bootleg portal gun fluid game, which they have made for them by a pretty shady version of Rick. We don't know much about them as individuals, but they did seem pretty excited for a Morty president at least. In the seediest side of Mortytown, all the way in the back of a club called the Creepy Morty, lives a Morty known as Big Morty. Like a lot of the residents of Mortytown, Big Morty doesn't seem to have a Rick at all, and instead has become something of a crime boss in Mortytown. While he does admit to the big part of his name being purely figurative, Big Morty does have the advantage of having a very thin mustache, so he's got that going for him. He also has been bribing Cop Morty in order to help him keep order in Mortytown for tasks like taking out that group of Mortytown locos. He also seems to have no qualms about running a club for Mortys by Mortys in which all of their Mortiest fantasies can come true. At least he named it exactly what it is: super creepy. Another more alien version of Morty is the purple Morty we see cleaning the floor of the convenience store called Morty Mart when the Mortytown locos come in and rob the place. This is yet another Morty who we don't know all that much about, but imagine based on his appearance that he has a pretty interesting backstory. With his purple face and long trunk similar to that of an anteater, Purple Morty isn't given all that much of a backstory. He seems disgruntled, however, about having to work at the Morty Mart, and it's suggested that he has a blog. Good for him. Some Mortys out there, however, love what they do, which is exactly what can be said about Morty K22. Morty K22 is a Morty Smith from the K22 dimension who works for the Citadel alongside his Rick. We meet him at the very beginning of Tales from the Citadel as he and his Rick appear through a portal into our Rick and Morty's garage, collecting donations to redevelop the Citadel after Rick C-137 destroyed it. He and his Rick have been portal hopping and collecting donations ever since it was destroyed, but once they realize exactly which Rick they're dealing with, they realize that this particular dimension is not going to be a lucrative one. One of the best things about the Citadel is all of the random Ricks and Mortys hidden in the background. One of our personal favorites is Cyclops Morty, who is, you guessed it, a Cyclops. But not only that, this Morty also has pointy elven ears and what appears to be 2 big fangs protruding from the lower part of his jaw. He also has 2 metal Wonder Woman-style bracelets on his wrists. Once again, we don't know a whole lot about Cyclops Morty, but he's gotta have some interesting stuff going on. What are those bracelets? Are they restraints? Sort of an emo fashion thing? Is his Rick also a Cyclops? We can only imagine. Maybe one day he'll get a spin-off. The first time we were really introduced to the idea of infinite Mortys is in Close Rick Counters of the Rick kind, when we see Evil Rick's terrible method of keeping himself hidden from the Citadel by torturing Mortys in a seriously over-the-top evil guy kind of way. With thousands of Morty prisoners, it's the first time we see some variation among them, including Antenna Morty, a Morty with, well, antennas. Taken as a slave by the evil Rick, or so we are led to believe, Antenna Morty is one of the more outspoken Mortys who rises up behind Morty C-137 in the revolution to break free of their bondage. Which brings us to the one true Morty. As the legend goes, the one true Morty is a holy prophet of the religion Mortyism, who all of the imprisoned slave Mortys believe will be the one to free them from captivity. In the holy book of the good Morty, it is written that the one true Morty will lead all Mortys away from following their Ricks and to true independence, before finally living for all eternity in a place called the Morty Afterlife Zone. While we don't know which of the imprisoned Mortys first came up with the idea for the one true Morty, it is what they have all held on to in order to make it through their suffering. He also has a super cool robot arm, a mohawk, and some sick six-pack abs. Back on the Citadel, there's a Morty who has seen a lot of action go down in his day, and that is Bartender Morty. Now, technically, there are 2 Bartender Mortys. The one who consoles Campaign Manager Morty after he's fired by President Morty, aka Evil Morty, and there's the one who's working at the Creepy Morty when Cop Morty shows up and everything goes down. While this is totally possible, and this is just one very hard-working Morty who has taken shifts at both bars across town, there might also just be 2 separate Mortys who know how to sling cocktails in the Citadel. There's one Morty who has proven more mysterious and given rise to more questions than just about any other Morty we've seen so far, even though he's never said a word. Seen only for a moment in the background of Close Rick Counters of the Rick kind, there is a Morty who looks weirdly just like a Rick, or perhaps a Rick who looks a lot like a Morty. Either way, this is Morty Rick, and his second long appearance on screen has birthed all sorts of fascinating fan theories about whether or not Rick and Morty might actually be the same person. We might never find out the truth about who Morty Rick is, but we hope we do one day. Ah, geez. You know we wouldn't finish off this list without including one very important Morty, now did you? We may not be the smartest people in the universe, but we know better than that. The Morty we're referring to is, of course, Evil Morty. Even more evil than his Evil Rick counterpart, Evil Morty might just be the ultimate Morty gone wrong. We first meet him as the real mastermind behind the twisted plan at the center of closer encounters of the Rick kind, disappearing into a crowd of Rickless Mortys. But in Tales from the Citadel, we see him having risen to power as the first Morty elected as president on the Citadel. He has proven himself to be brilliant and ruthless, and we just bet that we will be seeing a lot more from Evil Morty in Season 4. Cue ominous theme music. Wow, if you thought that these Mortys were impressive, well, now it's time to head over to our friends at CBR and check out the Rickiest Ricks. Tell them we sent you. There sure are a lot of Mortys out there. Which one's your favorite? Did we miss any Mortys who you think are absolutely essential? What other kind of Morty would you like to see pop up in future episodes? Let us know in the comments, and we hope you had a squanch time watching. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Screen Rant for more great content.